Welcome to the moving authentication from a single provider to all the socials. I apologize for the clickbait title. We're not actually going to all the social media apps at all. We're just going to add one or two very heavily curated identity providers. Quick introduction. I'm Tony Breeds. I've been using Linux since 1992. My finger says I have no mail. That's a lie. Have no plan. That's definitely the truth. Today, I'm going to give you a little bit of a history of how we got into the state we're in with OpenDev, a little bit of a summary of the problem, what we want in the solution, what solutions we've considered, and where we're at. So how did we get here? Well, OpenStack's 15 years old, way back in the dim dark before I was using OpenStack for sure. We were using Launchpad for issues and specs and blueprints, and there was like a heavy involvement from the Ubuntu community. So Launchpad used Ubuntu One as its authentication provider, so it just kind of made sense for OpenStack to use the same one. Sorry, I'm going to take my glasses off because then I can actually see you and the screen at the same time, otherwise it was one or the other. I just want to make it clear, I should have started with this point, I'm talking about the OpenStack infra, or now OpenDev point of view. I'm not talking about end users or an OpenStack that you might deploy, but more the environment that the OpenInfra Foundation and OpenDev use to support OpenStack and other Starling X, Zool, other project development. So we were using Launchpad for issues and so forth, so we needed some form of identification for Gerrit as well, so hey, let's just use Ubuntu One. Nailed it. And then we added a wiki to the OpenInfra, the OpenDev services. Well, we're already using Ubuntu One for Gerrit and bugs, so we'll just use that. And we added Storyboard. Storyboard was intended to replace Launchpad for bugs and issue tracking, but we didn't quite get there. But we added a new service and we needed identity, so we just used Ubuntu One. Nailed it. Fast forward, hand wave, somewhere between 3 to 12 years, where we are now. Ubuntu One's no longer actively developed. It showed a great deal of promise. It was going to be a globally useful single sign-on provider, et cetera, but corporate direction changed, and that isn't the way it went. Ubuntu One originally started as an OpenID 1.0 provider. There was active development to get it to 2.0, but shortly thereafter, active development stopped. The OpenID Foundation took well-appropriate feedback and sort of created this new OpenID Connect protocol, which is like the evolution, essentially, of OAuth 2, does authentication and authorization. OpenDev doesn't really want to be in the business of managing people's usernames and passwords. That's way more pressure than I'm prepared to deal with. I don't know about the other infra members, but yeah, no thank you. And OpenDev supports all of the OpenInfra Foundation level projects, you know, Zool, Starling X, OpenStack. Obviously, we started with OpenStack, but we've grown from there. Kata containers and Airship. So, where do we want to get to? Well, we want a solution where we have a single sign-on system for all of the OpenDev services. We want distinct realms specifically for Zool tenants, but also other services would benefit from being able to isolate users from one realm to another. We don't want to actually have to manage the authentication credentials themselves. A few here and there for very good reasons is okay, but thousands for all of the developers is less okay. We have an identity provider, OpenInfra ID. It was called OpenStack ID, but obviously after OpenStack Foundation became the OpenInfra Foundation, everything gets rebranded for the good reasons. And we need to be able to migrate all of the existing services to it. Now, I've got Zool in a question mark there because Zool doesn't actually use, it uses an authentication provider, but it doesn't use Ubuntu One. And what we want it to look like from the end user point of view is you want to log into any OpenDev service, Gerrit, Wiki, Storyboard, anything else we deploy going forward. The service redirects you to our new authentication provider, which then gives you a choice. You can pick who you want to be identified by, and then you go through the authentication process there, and then you come back and you're logged into the new service, and all of that should happen without you having to recreate a user anywhere along the way. And bonus points if the identity provider can establish roles and group permissions and so forth to facilitate group management in the application level. So we had a couple of options. We could extend the OpenInfra ID. There's at least half a dozen different ways we could have gone down that path, but essentially we're trying to expand the OpenDev services to be less OpenStack specific, so the OpenInfra ID really came from the OpenStack roots, so it kind of felt like a backward step to be using that to say we're then agnostic, because lots of people don't have that account, so they'd have to be forced to create one. We could extend Ubuntu One, but as I said, that's no longer being actively developed, so we'd essentially be doing a private fork of it, and that's a lot of work, and we don't really want to do that either. We could write our own identity provider. Identity is tricky, security is tricky, hosting private data is tricky, so we don't have the time for that. So that leaves us pretty much with extend an existing IDP. And the ones we looked at were Epsilon, Dex, and Hydra, and Keycloak. And they were, actually none of them was a perfect fit. They were all broken or hard to use for different reasons. A couple of them looked really good. So, the plan. Pick an identity provider from the list that I just gave you. Add support for Ubuntu One or OpenStack ID, depending which one it supports and which one it doesn't support. Allow services to use this new identity provider. This is all rocket science, right? And then we wait, and we wait. And then we give users more time to migrate from Ubuntu One to the new identity provider, and then we nag the latecomers, and then we just turn off access to Ubuntu One. And anybody that hasn't done the migration, well, then we have a recovery path, but let's hope we don't have too many of those, and then we profit. Yay! So, this is the fun stuff. I apologize if I get ranty in here. Where we're at. Well, we settled on Keycloak as the identity provider, mostly because, I can't believe I'm going to say this, mostly because it's a monolithic Java application, and we actually have experience running monolithic Java applications through Gerrit, so it wasn't as scary as it could have been. Yep. And as a test, we set it up to authenticate Zool admin and power users. So we're actually using Keycloak there as an OpenID Connect provider. And if you're one of these people, a Zool admin or a Zool power user, you can log in and you get extra features. Yay! And then we wrote a social plugin for Ubuntu One and added it to Keycloak. That's what I did for my Christmas break. Logins work. That's the hard part done. It's all downhill from here. I learned a lot about Java and container runtimes because that's how you got to test these things when you want, like, you've got your Keycloak service and your Gerrit service and your MediaWiki service. It's just easier to run them all in containers. Unfortunately, that wasn't the hard part. Learning new languages is fun, and Java is actually a new language for me. I mean, I did one university course in it a while ago. Yeah, I mean, I totally aced the iterating over command line arguments and printing out messages. Yay, hello world from blah, 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 blah. And that was as far as I got with Java. Turns out Java's come a long way since then. So I was essentially starting from scratch. It's fun, but it also sucks because you're like, how do I want to do something like a Python list interpolation. What's the Java equivalent? I don't know. You spend half an hour reading lots of different ways to do it and decide that none of them are what you want anyway. Containers are great, except when they don't contain what you want them to. You know, like trying to map user permissions so that you can like have config files outside of the container that are persistent, and you can have user data that persists across container restarts and all that sort of stuff. That gets a little bit fiddly. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's just way more work than I wanted to have to deal with. Documentation is fantastic, except when the thing you need to set is not documented anywhere, and you have to find it by grepping through source code, but you don't know what to grep for because you don't know what the thing is. Yeah, I have a patch to fix that though. And then we get to the nitty-gritty, verifying the data you get back from Ubuntu One as an OpenID provider. I get the data back, and I know it's right because I can totally just read it. I know it's right. But when I try to verify it, I send the data back to Ubuntu One and say, this is good, right? You've checked my signature, I've checked your signature, you're checking my signature, it's good. They say, no, it's not good. I'm like, wow. And then I track that down to the fact that the OpenID library wants you to use exactly the same manager object for authenticating and verifying. And due to Java object lifecycles and the way Keycloak's implemented, that's kind of tricky. And you can't actually store the claims until you've verified them, and you need to be able to store that information, right? You need to be able to store the username, their full name, the nickname, time zone, whatever profile information you're getting from your identity provider, you want to be able to store it, but you can't store it unless you've verified it. I mean, I could, but that's not a very secure system, and despite being a bit hacky, I really would quite like it to be secure and production ready. And then mapping users is actually not as easy as you would like it to be. I mean, for the most part, a single user, like myself, I used the same email address everywhere, except where I didn't. And I set the same display name everywhere, except where I didn't. I did actually legitimately set my language to English everywhere, though, but that's not actually super helpful. So when you've logged into a service provider, MediaWiki or whatever, and it says your display name should be this, and then you log into Gerrit and it says your display name should be this, which one do you pick? You know that they're the same account because they share an email address, hopefully, but mapping the users so that people don't lose their change history or their open reviews or whatever, that's turned out to be a little bit more complicated than we would have liked. So, there's a slide missing. That's unfortunate. I apologize again for getting you in here with a clickbait title and then not delivering on where I wanted to be. I wanted to have a demo of it all working, and I can actually log in with Ubuntu One and create a user and do all that sort of stuff. But sharing that user across multiple services is just not happening at the moment. So yeah, I've been Tony Breeds. I'd like to say thank you to the OpenInfra Foundation and the OpenDev team for helping me get this going. Red Hat, because they're my corporate overlord, and they support my community work, even when it's not necessarily on the product roadmap scale for accepting my talk. And, oh, Valencia College, I forgot to mention this in there. I even had it on my speaker notes, and I forgot it. Part of the research around possible solutions and stuff, we got a couple of university partnership program students, and they helped me do essentially a literature review, like what various identity providers there are, which services they can read from, which protocols they can speak out, and all that sort of stuff. And they did a lot to help me go down the Keycloak and writing a social plugin. So yeah, now we've got roughly 5 minutes for questions, if there are any. Sure.
So your social plugin that you wrote over Christmas break, that kind of like translates when people log in through Ubuntu One to Keycloak, log into the service? Is there some sort of translation?
Yeah, so the question was the social plugin I wrote, does it effectively translate between the Ubuntu One and a Keycloak user? And then, yeah, that's what it does. So when I didn't bring up the VPN. I can give you a demo afterwards, but yeah, so I say log into Keycloak with Ubuntu One. That redirects me to Ubuntu One, and I can log in there, or if I'm already logged in there, I can say, yes, I'm prepared to share this information with that Keycloak service. And then that information goes back to Keycloak. Keycloak creates a user based on the information that Ubuntu One gives it. And then I can, from that point on, I can log into Keycloak as that user. So, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Perfect. Anybody else? Sure.
Still working with those Valencia college students, or
Those students have graduated. I'd be happy to take on some more. Turns out I'm not a super good mentor when I don't have a solid end game. So the literature review was really helpful, and now that I've got maybe a dozen bugs that I need to fix, having some more people to help code would actually be good. So I should go find Corey. Yeah. That sounds good. Anyone else? Nope. Cool. Well, thank you all for attending. I hope it was moderately interesting. Hopefully, I haven't burned my bridges and I can come and give you another talk in a few months' time and show you it actually working. That might be a lightning talk, though.